Hi, OpenXML developers. I'm currently working on a project where I need to process runs sequentially from the very beginning of the document to the very end of the document. The code that I need to write needs to look at each run and then make a decision about what to do with that run and then proceed on to the next run. Well, there are a couple of ways to approach this. One way to approach this is you could write a recursive pure functional transform that triggers off each run, but the problem is I want to do something where I'm correlating two different runs, and it actually gets to be fairly convoluted code to write this code in the recursive pure functional style. I'm not a purist. I believe in whatever enables us to write code that is the easiest to understand and is the most maintainable code. And so in this particular case, what will work better is to have every run in the document in a sequence or in a collection that we can process just sequentially. Now, there is an approach of flattening all the paragraphs and flattening all the runs throughout the entire document. And this includes flattening things like tables and flattening text boxes. But this is a bigger project than I want to embark for this little bit of code that I need to write. So another approach to solving this problem is to write a custom axis method. I'm going to write an axis method that returns every run in the document in document order such that I can process them as I like to. These runs could be children of paragraphs. They could be children of paragraphs that are themselves children of a content control. Runs could be children of a paragraph that are children of a table cell. And of course, runs could be children of a paragraph that are children of a text box. Well, one of the things that we're going to use when writing this code is we're going to use the yield return keyword. And the yield return keyword enables us to write a lazy axis method. It doesn't need to materialize the collection and then return the collection. It's going to just return each run as it finds it. If you aren't familiar with yield return, then I have a blog post that you can review to understand yield return. So there is a little teeny gotcha that you have to pay attention to when you are writing a custom axis method. There's kind of two approaches. One approach is that you could do this in the non-lazy fashion and do this recursively, or you could do it in a lazy fashion, but you can't do it recursively. The two don't work together. In order to use recursion, you have to be able to use the return keyword. In order to make it lazy, you have to use yield return, and you can't have return and yield return in the same method. This is a limitation of the C# language. So I'm going to show you how we can write this particular method. We're going to write it non-recursive and lazy. So let's get started. I've created a little OpenXML program here. I've done all of the necessities to get this ready so that I can write code. So for instance, I've added the document format.openxml assembly to my project. I've added Windows Base to my project. I've also included the two modules that I commonly use in this type of code, the pt openxml util.cs and pt util.cs. And I've added the three using statements that I always like to add, the system.xml.link and document format.openxml.packaging, that's the OpenXML SDK, and OpenXML Power Tools. So we're ready to write some code. Let's write an axis method that returns every run in the document in document order and does it in a lazy fashion. So here is a little program that contains our axis method that operates in a non-recursive fashion. So this is the little bit of code here that tests the code or exercises the code. it gets the document runs in document order for the entire document. And for every run, as it gets it, it takes the child text elements, projects each text element to a string and does string concatenate. And then what this does is this prints the textual content for every run in the document. And here is our runs in document order. And because we need to write this to be lazy, in other words, we need to write it so that it uses yield return rather than creating a collection, it means that we cannot write this method in a recursive fashion. Instead, we have to write it using a stack. We have to maintain, as it were, our recursion in a stack here in this method. So we have the run collection state here is the current collection and the current node. And as we iterate through each collection, if we see that there are children elements, then we create a new run collection state and push that on the stack. So this is where we initialize the stack when we first come in with the document. It gets initialized with the children of the document element. That gets pushed on the stack. Then here's our loop. This loop continues until something breaks out of it. This loop works as follows. It peaks at the top of the stack. Having peaked at the top of the stack, it looks to see if the current node on the top of the stack is an element. If it is, and if it's a run, then it yield returns it. This little bit of code here where we test if the element name is not an MC fallback, we put this in there so that we don't process the markup compatibility content. We only want to process the choice content in this particular case. And here's where kind of the recursion happens. If the element that we're looking at has children elements, then it creates a new run collection state and pushes that on the stack and continues. So this stack gets deeper as we get deeper into the XML markup. Then after we've processed the current node, right here we get the next node. And this little loop here determines whether the next node is null. If it's null, then it pops the stack. And if we've popped ourselves all the way up to the very top of the stack, then we use this construct yield break, and that completely stops the iterator. That means we're at the end of the collection. If, however, we're not at the very top of the stack, then we peak at the popped up level and we set the current node equal to the next node. And again, we iterate through this little loop. If that's null, then we'll pop it again. We'll keep on popping until we get to a place on the stack where the next node is not null. Once the next node is not null, then it goes back up to the top of this loop, peaks at it. If we've got a run, it yields returns it. Again, if it's a fallback, we ignore it. And if that new element has elements, then again, we start pushing elements on the stack. So let's take a look at a document. Here I've got a document. It's got a sentence up here. The sentence has some bolded text in the sentence, so that is going to force that into a separate run. We then have a table. The table has AA, BB, CC, DD in the table. We are going to see those runs in document order. Then we have a paragraph that contains just this is a text. And finally, we have a text box. And in this text box, is bolded, and that's going to force that into separate runs. So let's run our example. And there we see every run in that document in document order. So the key point that I'm making in this screencast is that when you have the situation where you want to have a lazy axis method and you want to process things up and down the XML tree, you cannot use recursion in that particular case. Instead, you have to create a stack and maintain your state on the stack and then yield return the various elements as you find them throughout the XML tree. That's all I'm going to cover in this video. Thanks for watching. Come back often to openxmldeveloper.org. You can find my blog at ericwhite.com, and you can follow me on Twitter at ericwhitedev. See you next time.